Check 1, 2. Waiting to hear back. Check 1, 2, check. All right. Good.
Mic check, mic check. All right, everybody. Wow, we have a packed room tonight. Guys, I'm just up here doing a quick 2-minute warning, so if you guys can just start finding your seats. I advise to find your seat now. We are going to be standing room only. So if you guys just start finding your seats, we're going to get started in 2 minutes. Thanks, guys. All right. Wow, guys, this room is packed. Guys, my name is Eric Polanco. I'm the Vice President of the Palm Beach Young Republicans. And welcome to our second speaker series installment of our club. And we're fired up. Were you guys at our inaugural speaker series with Roger Stone? If you were, let me hear you. Come on. All right. All right. So, anyways, that event was great. Thank you guys for coming back out. What we're creating here, an environment that we're creating, it's special. We believe it's a gap in this market here politically in the environment, and we're so grateful to have Ashton as our fearless leader in doing that. So tonight we have a warrior, right? That's a warrior in the battleground of culture, right? Who knows that politics is downstream from culture, right? Andrew Breitbart. And that fight there, it's a tough fight, and we have somebody who's on the front lines every single day. He's funny about it, but he's on the front lines and he's fighting for us. And so I'm looking forward to that tonight. But I have some news. So just so you guys are aware, we've crossed 100 members in the Palm Beach Young Republicans. So right now we are the second largest group in the state of Florida. We're the fastest growing YR in the state of Florida as well. And we have no plans on stopping either. And like I said, it's because we have an amazing leader, Ashton Mulholland, and she really is. She had a vision a few months ago to put this together, and we're grateful to have such an amazing leader like Ashton. It takes a lot of work to put something like this together, and I think it's appropriate to say that nobody here makes any money for doing this. Thank you, Seth, for doing this kind of on the arm to support the environment and the young Republicans in the area as well. Nobody's making any money doing this, and it's a lot of work to do it. So I'm just grateful for Ashton putting this together, guys. And with that, we'll bring her up. So put your hands together for Ashton Mulholland.
Thank you, guys. I'm so glad you're here. I think at our last event we had like maybe 70-30 split with younger people versus older people. I feel like we have about a 90% younger people, under 40 in the room, so I'm excited about that. And yes, clap. And 100 members, you guys, in 2 events. This is our second major speaker event. This is awesome. We have standing room only. Really sorry for you guys in the back. But this is going to be great. We're creating an amazing environment. All of in this room, we have leaders. We have young leaders who are excited to get involved in politics, in government, because there's a difference between politics and government, and are fighting the fight in culture. So one of the things I want to say is, you know, a lot of times in politics, we have these events, and they're exciting, and they're fun, and we have speakers, and they're really cool, and yay, we want to take a picture and get a book signed. Okay, but what are we actually doing, right? What are we imparting to the people that are coming? Are we training them? So tonight, one of the reasons that we selected Seth, and Seth offered, but we did select Seth. He had to get it through the vetting process, is because Seth is a warrior, and he really is, and you know, he's a leader. He's a large platform, and to be making the stands and to have the conviction that he carries and the courage to stand on those convictions is a big deal, and it's very rare in our culture. So tonight, I'm going to have Seth share a little bit about his background and what created him and built him to be the man that he is, because how many of you guys know we need men like this? Preach, yeah. We need men like this, and we need women like this also, who are not afraid to back down from the Twitter mob or from Twitter itself. So without further ado, I would just love to bring up, I think you're a friend. I don't know, are we friends? Are we friends? My good friend, Seth Dillon.
I didn't say good friends. We're friends.
Well,
what was this a business about? No one's making any money from this? I'm not getting paid?
Well,
this is a charity event?
I think we have something for you later. We're not sure.
No. It's great to see you guys.
You have to earn it.
Thank you for coming out.
So, all right, so Seth, why don't we start? Can you just tell them a little bit about what you do? I think we have some older people in the crowd who might not ever have heard of the Babylon Bee. So you can just give us a quick little, what is the Babylon Bee and what are you doing?
The Babylon Bee is a news satire site. Our tagline is fake news you can trust. So our job, which is one of the most difficult jobs in the world, I think, is to look at what's going on in the world today and exaggerate it to draw, the insanity of it, the absurdity of it, hypocrisy, stuff like that. We use irony to make a point. I mean, a lot of you have probably heard of The Onion, which is, one of the most popular satire sites. We've now surpassed The Onion in traffic and engagement, so we're the world's most popular satire site, which is crazy if you think about it. But yeah, I mean, the reason I say our job is so difficult is, I mean, think about it. Imagine if your job is to write jokes that are funnier than what Democrats are doing in real life. I mean, it's not easy. Try writing jokes funnier than a Kamala Harris speech. It's not a cakewalk.
Amazing. Okay, and so tell us how you took over the Bee and what was that transition like for you?
I took it over in 2018, and it's funny, I came across it. It was being shared a lot. I was seeing it on Facebook, back when we used to actually get reach on Facebook before they started throttling us. And there were funny headlines, like a lot of them were church headlines. Like my dad's here today. My dad is a pastor, retired pastor. So I grew up in the church, and I appreciated the humor from the Babylon Bee with these church jokes. I think the first one I saw was something about how Holy Spirit unable to move through congregation as fog machine breaks. And it's all this thick cloud in the auditorium. You can't even see the stage. And it was just, it was really funny and insightful. And I looked at it more from the outside as possibly like an investment opportunity. So I reached out to the guy that was running it. I was like, are you trying to raise money? What are you trying to do? Are you going to turn this into something? It seemed like it was just a blog at the time. And he was trying to sell it. He was in the middle of selling it to the Daily Wire, and I'm glad that didn't work out because I was able to take it over. So taking it over, it changed my life dramatically because then I went from just being involved in generic business, which was boring, to funny fake news, which is a lot more interesting and controversial, apparently, as I found out. So
tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Growing up, did you ever think that you would be running the Babylon Bee? He wasn't funny enough.
I said I have a terrible upbringing, as my parents are sitting right here now. What about my upbringing, though?
Did you ever think that you'd be running a satirical news media outlet?
I don't know. Did you guys think I would ever be running a satirical news media outlet?
Was he funny growing up? Yes. Oh.
I disagree with that. I think I was probably more annoying than funny. Growing up, I was a really goofy kid. I was really silly. I don't know. In college, I was really goofy and silly. I had friends, I guess, that thought I was funny, but I wasn't the class clown who was always trying to get attention being funny. I was just, a silly, immature kid. Probably still am to some extent. But I mean, I don't think there's any way to see that coming. I certainly didn't see it coming. I did early on. I mean, when I was younger, I did want to be a writer. I did almost get kicked out of my Christian university for writing funny emails that were making fun of the entire university and the faculty and staff, and I sent it to everyone, which was really stupid. Don't do that. So I've been getting in trouble doing satire for a long time. So I guess it kind of made sense that it came full circle and became my career. But it wasn't something you ever really think to set out to do. That I'm going to run a comedy site on the internet. Like who even thinks that you can make money doing that? There aren't a lot of opportunities to make money doing that. So
from a business transaction to influencing culture to now speaking at Ron DeSantis's Bill of Rights outlet last night, can you tell us a little bit about what was going on with that?
Yeah, that came out of nowhere. There was a press conference yesterday. DeSantis held a press conference announcing that he's putting together this Bill of Rights, digital Bill of Rights, to protect privacy and freedom from big tech tyranny, this overreach, these companies that are just mining your data, exploiting your information without your consent, without your knowledge. There's no transparency, and also throttling your speech if you say things that they don't like. So fortunately, we have a governor who's willing to do something about that, which I really appreciate. And he invited me to be a part of this conference. He actually invited me like the day before it happened. He's like, can you come and talk? I want you to talk about your history with the Babylon Bee, big tech deplatforming, censorship stuff that you've had experience with, what you think should be done about that, and you have under 4 minutes. I'm like, okay. It's kind of a lot to get in 4 minutes, but...
well, we have a little longer than that, so why don't you share with the crowd what happened with Twitter last year? In the Bee.
I'm sure some of you probably know this story, but we got locked in Twitter jail for hateful conduct. So what happened was there was what we do, you know, the kind of the process of writing satire is you look at what's going on in the headlines, you look at what's in the news, and then you say, okay, well, what would be a funny take on this? Like, how could we spin this in some, you know, humorous angle and exaggerate it a little bit? And sometimes, you know, something just falls into your lap where it's just an obvious joke. USA Today named Rachel Levine. Whoa.
Those dang balloons.
USA Today named Rachel Levine Woman of the Year. And we responded to that. I think that's an insult to women everywhere, by the way, real women.
Yes. Thank you.
So we fired back in defense of sanity and truth and women with this headline. We said, our Babylon Bee's pick for Man of the Year is Rachel Levine. And Twitter didn't, I mean, they consider that misgendering, right? They have these policies against misgendering. If you do that, then you're engaging in hateful conduct because you're not affirming somebody, and that's really harmful to them. So, but really what it comes down to is that the policy is geared towards, what they say is it's geared towards protecting marginalized communities from being, you know, made fun of. And I just don't see how a high-ranking government official, white male, by the way, is a marginalized person. You know, especially with the transgender community at this point, it's like you're on the cover of magazines, you're on red carpets, like winning awards, Woman of the Year. I mean, this is not marginalization as far as I'm concerned when I look at the dictionary definition of that word. But yeah, we got locked out of Twitter jail for that joke, and we got locked in Twitter jail. They told us to delete the joke or we couldn't have our account back. We needed to delete it ourselves, and I think that's insane that not only if they didn't like it, they could have taken it down themselves. They wanted us to delete it and admit that we engaged in hateful conduct. And we refused to do that. It was like a snap decision. It was like, no, we are not going to do that. Even if it means we're never back on Twitter again, we refuse to delete that joke. And so that actually got a lot of attention. It got media attention. It got the attention of someone named Elon Musk, who you may have heard of as well. And he found that just outrageous that we were locked out of Twitter for a joke like that. And so, you know, 8 months later, he ended up buying Twitter and setting us free. He walked into, the Washington Post reported that he walked into Twitter with an urgent directive, bring back the Babylon Bee, which was pretty amazing.
That's pretty incredible. And so you refused to delete the tweet. And so I'm sure that there was some financial loss associated. There was probably some pushback. And so how did you decide to make that decision?
Well, I think even more than the financial aspect of it. I mean, you know, Twitter is one of the major social networks, and so we drive traffic through Twitter. But more important than that, I think Twitter's more valuable to us just because it allows us to be in the conversation. This is where a lot of, you know, this is where journalists are, it's where notable people and media are, there's celebrities, you know, all these people that engage with us, the Joe Rogans of the world, the Elon Musks of the world, even, you know, people in government like Ted Cruz, like this is where they interact with our content, is on Twitter. It's not on other platforms. So to be sidelined from that, to be out of that conversation was more costly to us, I think, than the financial cost. So it was really just removing ourselves, making ourselves less relevant than we would have been. But at the same time, you know, this action that Twitter took against us, it does to some extent have a backfiring effect. You know, you could call it the Streisand effect, you know, where it's like you try to suppress something and you draw attention to it. We had more media mentions last year by far than any prior year. So they drew a lot of attention to us by trying to take us down and us refusing to do what they wanted us to do. So, you know, it kind of backfired on them a little bit.
Okay, so it affected your engagement, obviously.
Yeah.
It affected you financially. So how did you stand for that decision to stay out and not engage in those conversations where somebody would say, like Joe Rogan said to you, why didn't you just delete the tweet? So why didn't you just delete the tweet?
It's kind of a weird, ironic thing because, like I said before, our tagline is fake news you can trust. Like we write funny fake news, that's what we do. But we were taking a stand for the truth. You know, it's a weird kind of ironic thing. Like the articles that we write, well, they are fictional themselves. There's truth to them. You know, that particular joke, naming Rachel Levine our pick for Man of the Year, what is it trying to communicate? It's pushing back on the lie that men can become women and women can become men.
They can't.
And
Are you sure? What are you again?
Depends on who you ask.
Okay.
But it's an affirmation of a truth. And it's doing it in a humorous way. It's coming at it from a humorous way, but it's using a fake story, a fictional story, to communicate an important, timeless truth and try to in the effort to try to speak truth to culture, I think it'd be silly if that's our mission and we're not willing to stand for the truth in a situation like that. I mean, deleting the joke and admitting that we engaged in hateful conduct, something felt really wrong about that. You know, if it'd be one thing, if they had simply deleted the tweet themselves, I would have complained about the censorship. But asking us to delete it and admit that we had engaged in hateful conduct, the truth is not hate speech. No. The truth is not hate speech. Amen. So, you know, we're going to take a stand on that principle, that this effort to try to shut you up for misinformation, incitement, hate speech, whatever, when all you're doing is saying what's obviously and objectively true, is just insane. And the only way it stops is if people do stand up and do something about it. So, you know.
All right, so whether it's the trans movement, children's sex ed, abortion, you have not shied away from any of these topics and addressing them in culture. So why are they so important to you, and how do you have the courage and conviction to speak up about these things?
Good question. I am asked that sometimes, like, why do you care about these issues? And I think it's a weird question. Sorry, you know, I'm not saying the way that you asked it, it wasn't weird, but usually the way that people ask the question is like, well, why do you care so much about abortion? Well, why don't you? Are you serious? You know, we're talking about millions of innocent, defenseless lives hanging in the balance. These are children, humans made in the image of God, and their lives are being snuffed out for convenience, on demand, and you don't care about that? I think it's insane. I flip it on them and I say, why don't you care? I think we should all care a lot more than we do. This is part of the problem with how insane the world has become, is that we're inundated with all this madness, all this moral depravity and insanity where 2 and 2 make 5 and right is wrong and up is down. We're so accustomed to it that we don't even find it that objectionable anymore. It's just normal. It's just everywhere, and we don't care. We don't do enough. We don't say enough. So I think that we absolutely should care about these things. So we should care about not just life, but truth, reality. There's a war on truth and reality and life. And at some point, we have to decide to engage in this war, or we're going to lose it quickly. We already are.
So I think a lot of us in this room probably share a lot of those convictions, but we're maybe not as courageous or as firm to be able to stand for those things. So what would you say to the people in the room that have similar convictions but are maybe a little hesitant to kind of stand for them?
Well, I guess it depends on the person and the situation that they're in and why they're maybe hesitant to stand for them. You know, sometimes people will say, you know, I'm afraid I'll lose my job if I speak out. You know, sometimes it's even less serious than that. It's like, oh, I'm afraid I might get banned on Instagram or something like that. And I'm like, the greatest accomplishment is getting banned on these platforms for saying something true. What are you talking about? Like, it's not getting a lot of followers. It's getting banned for saying something true. That's a cool thing. You should aim for that. There's a cost. There usually is a cost. In some cases, again, the Bee is very successful, and we've become more successful because of the stand that we've taken. That's one of the ways that I try to encourage people, is there will often be an immediate cost. You might lose your job, but you might also find other opportunities down the road, and you might embolden other people to take a stand. One of the problems with people self-censoring and being shy about these things and not being willing to speak up, not being bold and courageous about it, is we give the tyrants more power than they should have. We keep ourselves quiet, and what that ends up doing is it makes it so that anyone who does speak up is an outlier, and they're easy to squash. You make them stand alone. If you all stand up at the same time, how are they going to squash you? You know, you become much more powerful. You take the power away from the mob that's trying to cancel and deplatform and shut everyone up. So unless it starts with 1 or 2 people, it'll never get off the ground. It won't go anywhere. So I try to encourage people, you know, even if there's a cost to you, you may embolden somebody else, and you might end up with a whole movement on your hands. And so
and here
that's
we are.
Really important. Yeah.
Look at the room.
Yeah.
It's really good. Okay, so personally, we talked about this earlier, but you know, I was bullied as a kid, and I'm thankful because I think bullying builds character, and I think it also equips you for politics. So, what were you ever bullied as a kid? Like, how do you take that, the character assassinations against you, for holding these convictions and standing for truth?
I I dealt with some rough kids at various points. I was never really aggressively or bullied in like some kind of recurring way where there were just kids that picked on me over the course of time. I'm sorry you dealt with that. But, you know, there is probably, to some extent, it does build character. I think, you know, the more you face attacks, the more resilient you have to become. You have to grow thicker skin. But, you know, I try to look at it from the perspective of these people who are attacking me, what do I want their praise? I mean, come on, like when the New York Times came after us and called us like a far-right misinformation site that sometimes traffics in misinformation under the guise of satire, and they were like trying to feed this narrative that we were misleading people on purpose. And people ask me like, how do you feel about the New York Times attacking you? I'm like, I want the New York Times attack. If the New York Times is praising me, I'm doing something wrong. So.
Yes.
You do need to some extent, be willing to wear the attacks as a badge of honor and say, look, I don't want the people that hold these views, the people that think this stuff is good, insane, and reasonable, I don't want those people praising me. I want those people attacking me. I've made good enemies. You can't stand for the truth and not make enemies. And I think it's better to be divided by the truth than united in lies.
Yeah, amen. That's good. So, you know, with the evolution of the Bee and your platform, I mean, Seth has almost 600,000-ish followers.
If you round up, yes.
We're rounding up. 600,000-ish followers on Twitter. You know, with this evolution and the increase in your platform, like, how have you dealt with that personally and in business to be able to still stand for things that you believe in? And then what sacrifices have you had to make personally and maybe even with the work?
What was the first part of the question? How do
So
I have dealt with what?
Some thousand
What did the
followers.
followers have to do with the?
Well, as your platform has grown,
Yeah.
you've had to make some sacrifices personally and with work to be able to stand for the convictions that you have. So how have you dealt with that?
I think that probably the biggest sacrifice, the toughest thing on me personally that weighs on me the most is the way that it's not the attacks and the you know, the people hating on me on Twitter or whatever, like trying to ratio me or the media smearing us or something. It's more just how much of my time and attention all of this takes, and it takes time away from my family and the travel that I have to be doing. You know, like that can be very burdensome because it's, you know, you don't want to pour yourself into something to such an extent that you neglect the most important things in your life. And so balancing that has been very challenging. There haven't been a lot of personal costs otherwise. I mean, it's you know, it's been great to see that the work that we're doing is so well received and has gotten so popular, and that it's been such a part of the conversation, and that we've, you know, that we now have allies like Elon Musk who are doing things to try to restore free speech because our voice was silenced. I mean, it's really cool to be a part of all of that. It's hard to really say that it's like cost me much. We've gained a lot, but it has been extremely taxing just in terms of, you know, the extent to which I've had to devote my time and attention to fighting this fight.
So you're the American dream. This is what you're saying? So everybody here, so if you build a following and you make fun of liberals, you're going to live the American dream. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you stand for the truth with enough conviction, they will try to tear you down, but they'll only make you stronger, and you will build a following off of that. I think that the people that are the really bold voices out there that are speaking the truth are growing a following for that reason. In spite of and often because of the attacks on them. So I think that's an encouraging thing. You know, it's not going to be easy in the sense that there's never going to be any like adversaries on the other side who are coming after you and trying to tear you down. But it will be rewarding because you'll know that you're, you know, at least that you're doing something impactful and you're making all the right enemies.
Speaking of, so in August of last year, you went on to Joe Rogan, and you got into a contentious debate around the issue of abortion, where Joe accused you of hypothetically asking his 14-year-old daughter to carry a rapist baby, to which you responded, "Two wrongs don't make a right," and proceeded to state that a fetus is a person with potential, not just a potential person. So how are you feeling when one of the most popular alt-media personalities started pressing you on this issue?
it was uncomfortable,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest.
I could see it.
I actually did literally squirm in my chair at one point, because, you know, when you go on Rogan's show, there's no preparation for what you're going to talk about. You don't have an expectation that there's certain topics that you're going to hit. You just show up and you have a conversation.
Did anybody watch it? Yeah, it's really long. It's like 3 hours.
Yeah. It is
Joe did
long.
most of the talking too.
It's hard to get through entire interviews.
He talks a lot.
Yeah, he does talk a lot.
It's like, can we let Seth talk, please?
Yeah. Can I talk, by the way?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Can I answer your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Gotcha. What ended up happening, I don't even know, I don't remember who brought up this subject. But one point I do make is that while there wasn't like we were prepared to talk about the topic, but I was prepared to talk about the topic, just in the sense that I know what I believe and why I believe it on this particular issue. And I think that's important for us to be able to articulate what we believe and why we believe it, so that when you are in a situation, like if any of you get invited on Joe Rogan's show, you'll be ready to talk about it. You know, you never know if that's going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen to me, so it can happen to anybody, I guess. But he went straight for the most emotionally charged example that he could, and he made it very personal by not just saying, oh, so you think a teenager who's raped should have to carry that baby. He said, I have a teenage daughter. Are you telling me that my teenage daughter, if she gets raped, has to carry that baby? Well, for one thing, that would be his grandchild. So that's one thing to think about, right? Do I think that you should murder your would support the murder of your grandchild? No, I don't. I don't. Even though the circumstances of how it came about, you know, anyway.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
My response to it was basically to lay out a syllogism. I wanted to keep it as dispassionate as possible and not get into a heated argument with him, and just say, look, it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human life. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human life. Therefore, abortion is wrong. And it's that simple. It's that simple. And none of the points that he made, not one of the points that he made, refutes either of the premises in that argument. And the conclusion follows logically and necessarily from those premises. So if you push somebody to do that, make them try to refute that, you know? Do you think it's okay to kill innocent people? No.
And then he backed off.
Yeah, he eventually did back off.
Yeah.
But, you know, he brought up some points like, you know, do you think that there's some kind of magical moment that happens right at conception? And yes, I do, actually. I think it's the most magical thing there is. A new life is created. I mean, God is bringing a new life into the world. But, you know, I asked him, I said, well, where do you think the magic happens? Because you think we become valuable humans at some point. Where do you say that magic moment is when all of a sudden it goes from non-human to human with value and rights? And he never answered that question, which was kind of telling. But as far as how I felt in that moment, it was uncomfortable because it was very confrontational. But look, I stood my ground. I gave him a very, I think, reasonable response. And then he kind of came around and was like, I see where you're coming from. So I think it was, you know, a productive conversation. It's nice to be able to have productive conversations like that. And on such a platform, 12 million people listen to his show. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I think you made him nervous.
Maybe, I don't know.
Oh. Okay, so with all these different media outlets, like, you know, we have the Joe Rogan show, we have Twitter, we have all these different alternative media, you know, platforms and things that are popping up all over the place. Where do you see the evolution of media and satire conversing in the future as we go on?
I don't know. Have you seen our artificial intelligence generator for AOC articles that make fun of AOC?
No. Do we need to see that?
We created an AOC article generator. It uses ChatGPT, and it just with the click of a button generates new articles that make fun of AOC.
Oh my God.
Maybe we'll just have an AI chatbot that will just write satire for us, and I can retire. I don't know. I mean, is this kind of like a where do I see myself in 5 years
what's
kind of
going on
question?
with Facebook? Because now Facebook is kind of censoring things differently, right? You were talking about that the other day.
Facebook is doing weird stuff. So Facebook, they originally, what happened with Facebook was, you know, 2018, in 2018, they were really facing a lot of backlash for being responsible for Trump getting elected, right? It was like, well, you guys didn't do enough to stop the spread of misinformation, so now look what we have. We have this fascist Nazi in the White House. It's your fault. So what are you going to do about it? And their answer was, okay, well, we're going to fact check everyone, including jokes. We're going to rate them false. And so they started fact checking our jokes.
Fake news.
Yeah, and rating all of our jokes false.
Like, yes, we are fake news.
Yeah, we are, but we're not that fake news. There's distinctions between different kinds of fake news. But they started rating our stuff false. That was one of the things. And then, eventually they started doing this thing where they were assigning a news quality score to every site that's publishing on Facebook. And we got a low news quality score because we keep getting fact-checked and our articles keep getting rated false. And so now, we publish articles and they don't get any reach at all. We had one not that long ago. We published an article that was seen 11 times. We have millions of followers. 11 times. It's insane. I joked that it's like I could have pinned it to a telephone pole in a small town and it would have been seen more times than when I posted it on Facebook to our millions of followers. That's crazy. That's really ridiculous throttling.
You were blacklisted.
Yeah, well, I mean, our stuff, Facebook was, I don't know if you guys remember the Wild West of Facebook, but the golden years of 2016, 2017, you could post something on Facebook and it would go crazy viral, insanely. But we had some articles, individual articles that were shared 4 or 5 million times. Individual articles. Motorcyclist identifies as bicyclist, sets world record, stuff like that. They won't let that get shared at all anymore. So things have changed with Facebook. So we've become much less dependent on these platforms. And I've never, one of the questions I often hear is, should we leave these platforms because of how they treat us? And I don't really advocate for that. I don't argue that we should remove ourselves from where the meaningful discussions are happening. We're actually engaging with people on the other side of the aisle. I don't think that we should silo ourselves or whisper to ourselves in the corner on these smaller platforms that don't have the same kind of reach. You just remove yourself from the battle that needs to be fought. Why would we do that voluntarily? Make them and make you leave. Make them ban you. That's my position on it.
That's so good. That is so good. Okay, so you just said the battle. That's the battle right now. What do you see as the biggest battle right now in culture? How are you engaged? Obviously, you're engaging it. How would you say that we can engage it?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest battles right now, one of the most important battles that needs to be fought is the battle over radical gender ideology. I mean, this is it's affecting so many things. I mean, it's affecting women's privacy in locker rooms and bathrooms, women's sports. It's one of these things where, and I don't know how the women in this room feel about it, but like when I watch one of these things like Leah Thomas jumping into a pool with all these women and blowing them away, why are the women jumping in the pool? Why don't they all stand there and refuse? Let Leah Thomas swim by himself. Yeah. It doesn't change until women stand up and say, we're not going to do this anymore. That's a battle that needs to be fought. And there are too many people who are dancing around that, we want to be nice, we want to be compassionate, we want to be understanding, but we do this to a fault. You can't sacrifice truth on the altar of niceness, I think is the way Matt Walsh put it today on Twitter. It is important obviously, as Christians to be kind and loving, it's not loving to lie to people, and it's not loving to allow these lies to be advanced, especially when the ultimate outcome and the aim right now is to go after kids with this stuff. Lying to these children, with the way that I put it, we talk about, they call it gender-affirming care, which I put scare quotes on that because it's a terrible euphemism for chemical castration, mutilation, surgical mutilation. Gender-affirming care sounds positive. It's not. And it's not affirming their gender either. It's contradicting their gender. Where was I going with that? I don't know. The problem with these things, it's affecting kids. What we're doing is, it's not like we have a situation where there's so much confusion in these children and we need to be really compassionate about how we respond to that. We're planting the confusion there. Yeah. They're cultivating the confusion. So they're creating a problem in the mind and then treating it by mutilating the body. That's insanity. And there's nothing good or loving or kind about going along with that or enabling that or being soft on that. So I think it's very important that these are the battles that we engage in for the sake of women and children primarily. And women's voices are going to be very strong on these issues.
Yeah, we're definitely working on that over here. We have men's and women's clubs. We believe in 2 genders here, so you're safe. So you have 2 young boys, right?
Yes. Yeah.
2. So how are you raising them in this climate? What is school like for them? What are you and Tara training them in? How do they address these things as young little children?
Well, they haven't been exposed to a lot of this stuff. I mean, they do go to a private Christian school, which is really beneficial. You know, they're not in a school that's trying to shove this down their throats. And, you know, we're trying to be selective about what we allow them to watch that might have some of this messaging in it, because they try to smuggle it in. And there's been times it's slipped through where we do not expect that this particular program geared towards these particular ages will have this nonsense in it, but it's there. It's there all over the place, and sometimes it's very subtle. But it's very purposeful, too, because they know that this subtle messaging just slips through their defenses, and kids soak up everything. They notice things that we don't even notice. So it's really tough. It's really tough. You can't do enough to lock down your kids, probably.
That's wild. All right, so we talked a lot about culture, so let's circle back to politics. Did you ever think that you would be speaking behind a Ron DeSantis platform?
No. No. You mean like I did at this press conference thing? No, and I wouldn't have thought that even when I took over the Bee initially. You know, I never really thought that there would be a battle that we would be engaged in. I mean, look, we make jokes on the internet. Like, that's our job, is to make jokes on the internet. Who expects to be politically involved when that's your role? And I know that we make a lot of political jokes, but it's mostly fun and lighthearted, and it's meant to make people laugh and bring levity to these situations. So you never really expect that you're going to be. We certainly didn't ever expect to be caught up in a battle for like the preservation of freedom and the restoration of sanity. Like that wasn't on our radar. But I do think, you know, that humor is an effective tool to be used in that fight. And so we've tried to make jokes that challenge these bad ideas, that ridicule these bad ideas, the ones that are deserving of mockery. We try to wage war in that way. And then, you know, when they try to stop us and shut us up, then the fight becomes about our free speech, our right to make these jokes. And so it's interesting. We're in a unique position. I think that a lot of people like DeSantis are interested in hearing our voice, because it's so much more absurd to silence comedians from making jokes about these things than someone else. You know, like Rachel Levine, Man of the Year, like that was the headline that got us locked out of Twitter. Like, how in the world is that so controversial and threatening to anyone? How telling is that, by the way, that joke is threatening? How telling is that? You know, if you have to silence people that are making jokes about you, you're pretty insecure about your worldview.
So insecure in your beliefs.
It conveys a lot of insecurity when you're engaging in those kinds of tactics. You know, just make fun of us back or ignore us. You know, these platforms, and it's one of the things about these platforms that's so crazy to me, this effort to always ban people that say things you don't like. What about muting them or blocking them, tuning them out, unfollowing them? Like, you don't have to listen to people. No one's making you.
So good. All right, so you talk also a lot about the moral imperative of mockery. So what should we be making fun of right now? Do you need water?
Drink from my giant
Okay,
water.
take a drink. You're in my living room right now. These are my living room chairs. Fun fact.
What was the question about the moral case for mockery?
What should we be making fun of right now?
Well, anything that deserves it. You know, when people ask me like who my favorite comedian is, my answer is whoever's making the jokes that you're not supposed to make. You know, I mean, seriously, like what the approach to comedy is right now. Comedians are, there's a couple of things going on. You watch like late night comedy, and these guys are going for what someone called it clapter. They're going for the applause of affirmation instead of like the laughter of amusement, right? And that's not funny. They're propping up the popular narrative and supporting it. You've got comedians on late night TV doing COVID songs, dancing about the importance of COVID shots. That's not funny. It's ridiculous. And it's just propaganda. And the thing that comedians have historically, satirists and comedians have historically done so well is challenge the popular narrative. And that's what people really want to see. That's what really is entertaining to them, and what they find really funny and interesting is when the popular narrative that's being promoted is having holes poked in it by comedians. And the popular narratives right now are things like this gender madness, like that's coming from the top down. To be making fun of that is not punching down on the marginalized. It's punching back. It's pushing back on the popular narrative that's being promoted. So I think any comedian who's willing to do that is doing his job. And if you're not able to make fun of these things, if the popular narrative is off limits, then comedy itself is off limits.
What do you think of Dave Chappelle?
I think he's great. I think he's hysterical. He's been willing to make a lot of these jokes that would get you canceled if you weren't as big as him. And this is the challenging thing if you're talking to somebody who's like an up and coming comedian, and you tell them, oh, well, you got to make the jokes you're not supposed to make. It'd be hard to get anywhere because they'll try to cancel you right out of the local comedy club. Chappelle's big enough that I think the cancel attempts on him only make him bigger. We established ourselves enough that the cancel attempts on us only made us bigger. Joe Rogan, they've tried to cancel him. He's only more popular than he's ever been. So it often backfires. It's tougher when you don't have that following already underneath you. It's tougher to be bold like that because you don't just have that built-in following. So I don't know. I mean, I respect Chappelle a lot. Some other comedians too who I disagree with on almost everything, like Bill Maher, for example. Every now and then a rant of his will go viral, like he'll do his monologue or something, and it's just spot on. Every point of it is spot on. With the gender stuff, he did this whole talk about how, like, we're trending towards everyone being non-binary and gay at some point. It's like, how is this possible? There's an explosion happening right now. It can't be that all of a sudden now all these kids are born in the wrong body. It just can't be. And he's like, kids don't know what they want. They're impressionable. Like, I wanted to be a pirate when I was a kid. Thank God no one scheduled me for eye removal and peg leg surgery. And that's great. I love that. That's good comedy because he's making fun of what deserves to be made fun of. This is insane. It's gone too far. And he sees that and he's pushing back on it, even though he's a secular, progressive atheist. He still sees it. So thankfully, there's some reasonable people out there.
Well, you know what's wild is that group, the LGBTQ, LMNOP, it's like 3% of the population. And they're running 100% of culture right now. And I think as believers and as conservatives and as Republicans and whatever we are in this room, I think it's our job, and I think we've failed. And I think people like Seth set a great example for speaking up and for standing up for values and pushing back and making fun of it because it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous that a 2-year-old can decide its gender, can't even talk. So, I just think it's insane how I think we've failed. I think normal people have failed. And I think people like you are doing a great job to push back on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, think about that for a second, like deciding your gender. Like this idea that you can have a girl in a boy's body. Like, what does it mean to be a girl? Well, it means to have a girl's body. That's what it means to be a girl. Like, that is what it is. Like, you can't be in the wrong body when that's what that means. But how do we not see that? How is that not abundantly clear? Yeah. It's insane. So it does, yeah, it's deserving of mockery. I think mockery is a moral good in a situation when you have bad ideas that are doing harm like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so I only have one more question, and then we can take some questions from the crowd. I think we have about 10 minutes. So my last question is just, with all of us in the room, not all of us have big platforms or big companies, or just we don't feel like maybe we have huge realms of influence. So what would you say to the people in this room who maybe have smaller platforms, smaller jobs, don't know a lot of people, to be able to stand for the values and the morals that we stand for?
Well, I mean, like I was saying before,
let me phrase it first. If they feel like what their platform isn't as influential, and they wouldn't make a difference if they actually stood for the values that you're doing because you have such a big platform.
Yeah, well, the point that I was making before, though, is that it is influential if you take a stand in a situation where everyone around you isn't, even if you don't have a large audience, because unless people do that and start doing that in larger numbers, then anyone who does will be an outlier. And so you do have an influence in your immediate sphere, whether it may be with your family, it may be in your workplace, it may be at your university, wherever you are. Taking a stand will have an influence in that way. And the more that we band together and do that together, the more that influence will grow. And so I don't think that you necessarily need to have like a huge audience to have an impact. In fact, it's the other way around. The reason that we have a huge audience is because we've taken a bold stand for the truth. It's not like you get the audience first. So, you know, you can certainly, there's huge opportunity out there to have an impact beyond your immediate surroundings, because you will draw negative attention to yourself initially by speaking boldly for the truth. But again, I think that it's one of those things, like I didn't define what it is earlier, but the Streisand effect, for those who don't know, it's like it's like Barbara Streisand was trying to conceal these pictures, these overhead pictures that had been taken of her house. Someone had posted them online and they had like 15 views or something like that. And so she sued the photographer that took them and posted them, and the lawsuit ended up attracting attention to them, and then they got viewed millions of times. And so it's like these efforts to shut you up will draw more attention to you. So you actually will have more of an impact than you realize by drawing that fire. And it won't necessarily be fun, but that's the only way to have an impact, is to go through that challenge. So, and the other thing too is it's like you don't have to reach millions of people with your tweets in order to have a meaningful impact. I mean, just changing one person's mind and heart on an issue like abortion is a huge thing. You might save a life. I mean, half of us are women. You might save a life.
Joe Rogan's granddaughter.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it doesn't need to be large scale to be impactful. I think every person matters, and so even one person, having influence on one person is of infinite value. One person is worth more than the entire universe.
That's good. That's really good. All right, so if you have a question, I want you to come stand right behind Kat. Come on up here. We're going to make a little line. We'll take like 3 or 4 questions.
I got a question. Hi, y'all. God bless America.
Okay.
I'll just start.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. B, would you please make some jokes about the active recalls going on in New Orleans, Oakland, and right here in West Palm Beach? We have active recalls here. I'd love to get it out there. And, thanks for your balls.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, interesting. Anybody else have a question? Come on up. And then I'll repeat your question for the crowd.
So how do you determine what's funny and what's not?
How do you determine what's funny and what's not?
A lot of what's happening, like, it's not funny. Like, it's really messed up stuff.
Because basically,
It might have been, you know, but, like, it's not funny. A lot of the stuff is not funny, man. Like, it's serious shit.
Yeah.
But just kind of curious how you distinguish what to choose to make fun of, what to kind of, just curious.
you want to rephrase the question?
Well, I can repeat it, my answer. I mean, he's asking, you know, how do we, because so many of these things that are happening are so messed up, it's like they're not funny. How do you make fun of, how do you turn it into a joke? I mean, to some extent, not all of satire is necessarily funny. I think that a lot of the articles that we write are making a point that is sometimes it makes you kind of almost cringe or go, ooh, you know, that was savage. It's not always laugh out loud hysterical. And sometimes, you know, especially with these more sensitive topics, like it's very hard to write jokes on the topic of abortion. That's not a funny topic. But we do have a lot of satirical articles on that topic that I wouldn't usually describe as being like hysterical articles, but they do come at the issue from a creative, witty angle that exposes the absurdity of some of the pro-death arguments. So, you know, it's not always about being funny. But as far as like what we choose to make fun of, I mean, there's always something in the news that's worth making fun of. The challenge is, how do you do it? How do you stay ahead of how do you make some jokes that are funnier than what Democrats are doing in real life? And how do you tell jokes that actually stay jokes for more than a week because Democrats are making them come true? Those are the main challenges.
All right. First off, thank you for coming. I love everything that you're saying, and I love your Instagram. All right. So I'm sure that you caught the real good stuff after the State of the Union, which is Sarah Huckabee Sanders' rebuttal. we're definitely that next generation that's going to carry our party next generation, like the next, hopefully for the next infinite generations to come. But what would be your advice, like from the local? Do we start local and spread out national, or like how can we?
That's a very good question. I don't have a lot of experience with that. In fact, that's probably a question better aimed at you. How would you answer that question?
I would say welcome to the Palm Beach Young Republicans. That's what we're doing here. No, but for real, that is what we're doing here. And so just getting involved even in this. I mean, we're going to bring in speakers like Seth who are, waging the war in culture and then waging the war in politics and media. It's just bringing the right people together.
What was he yelling? At me? It's not that hard to live with attacks like that. I mean, it's
kind of fun.
Yeah. Happy to have you as an enemy, sir.
Go ahead.
My name's James Van Dillon. I rap, and I made a song that's called Divide Us, and it's just about all the division with all these narratives. And my question to you was, I put this song out and it pissed off a lot of people. It got to like 40,000 views, and I noticed that YouTube started throttling it. So it would go up and then it would go back down. What do you do? How do you attack that?
When they start throttling you? Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot that any individual account can do about that. But, this is where the politics are interesting, because the press conference that I was at yesterday, we elected Governor DeSantis. And what he's doing is he's looking out for people like you and trying to advance legislation that's going to deal with that problem. He's trying to make sure that we all have access to these platforms and that that they're not engaging in discriminatory behavior, that they're transparent about why they're throttling people or why they're suspending people, that they give you an option to appeal those things, that you understand what's happening with your data. There's a lot that can be done to deal with those issues by simply voting for the right people. You vote for the right people, they appoint the right judges, these decisions have to be made, and all of a sudden the laws are changed and we're dealing with some of these problems. I am very hopeful. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of success if you try, for example, to sue Google or something like that, but there will eventually be some legal changes that happen, either with the state level, state laws, federal laws, potentially reform with Section 230, or court orders. So the Supreme Court is going to have to look at some of these things eventually and make some decisions about how these platforms, basically what they need to do is they need to balance the right of these platforms to moderate how they please and the right of the people to speak freely. And how are they going to do that? And with the Supreme Court that we have right now, in fact, there's a couple of cases that are going up to them where they're going to have a chance to look at this. I think we'll have a favorable ruling. So I'm optimistic about where these things are going. I don't know that there's anything that you can do right now, and I don't know the CEO of YouTube. If you get suspended on Twitter, I'll talk to Elon for you, but let me know if you have an issue there.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for your question. By the way, the guy that ran by and called me a liar, I was just thinking, who knows what point he was even trying to make, if he knows who I am. I presume that he does. But these are people, they believe that boys can become girls, and they're calling me a liar. I bet he thinks a baby is a clump of cells that can be discarded and isn't really a life. He's calling me a liar. There's a lot of things that they will advance, a lot of ideas that they have in their heads that are in fact harmful misinformation. And they're going to call you a liar when you stand up for the truth. I think that's kind of funny and ironic. Anyway, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. My friend pointed out to me that I don't think he was calling you a liar. I think he was saying, fire Joe Biden. But I was just curious, is there anything off limits? Has Babylon Bee made a policy decision that maybe this person or this topic is something we're not going to talk about?
He's asking if there's anything off limits with our comedy, like are there targets that we won't joke about? No, there's no topic or person where we've said no, we won't joke about that. There are certain sensitive topics where we want to be mindful of how we craft the joke. there's a lot of topics, for example, there might be something that comes up that's on our radar that isn't necessarily known nationally very well. And if we make a joke about it, maybe it will be misinterpreted or misunderstood because there's not enough context. People really need, in order to get the joke, you have to know the context. And if the joke is happening in a vacuum where you don't have that context, it can be easily misinterpreted. So that's one thing, but it's not like there's certain issues or people where we say, no, you can't joke about that. I think it's, in fact, I think it's very healthy if we had sacred cows that we don't want to be joked about. That's what you should definitely joke about. That's what would be deserving of having joked about. It's these things that we hold on to that we say, no, this is off limits. That's what you want to go after. Those are the things that you want to joke about because those are the things that we're holding on to so tightly that we're either taking so much pride in and our pride needs to be taken down a level, or we're just overvaluing it and it's comical to the extent to which we're treating it like it's something that's so, it's such a common thing that we get from people. They say, I usually like satire, but this time you went too far. And it just happens to be like some innocuous random joke about like, I don't know, crazy people at Walmart or something. And it's like, this time we went too far. What are you talking about? It just happened to be something that was personal to them. And they're fine with joking about everything else until it's personal to them and it's an issue that matters to them. I think if there are issues that matter to us so much that we don't want them to be joked about, then we have a problem.
What about when they come true? What about not the bee? What's going on with that?
I have a spreadsheet where we're tracking jokes that have come true. We call them fulfilled prophecies. We have, how many is it? Morgan, do you know how many it is on their sheet? 95? 90. Yeah, 90, okay. About 90 jokes that we've told that have come true. And it's kind of sad. It's funny, but it's sad. And that's just one of the challenges of trying to stay a step ahead of reality when reality is as crazy as it is. The reality is going to catch up to you every now and then.
That's so good. All right, everybody. Oh, one more question? Go ahead.
Seth, you mentioned Section 230. Can you explain a little bit about what Section 230 is and what you would recommend in terms of the reforms that could or should be made?
Very good question. What is Section 230 and what should be done about it? So Section 230 was created in the 90s, basically so that these online forums, you wouldn't be held liable if you made moderation decisions on your internet forums. So if people are posting content that you want taken down, it's lewd or indecent or something like that, you need to be able to take it down. You need to be able to engage in moderation without being held liable for those decisions. You don't want to be sued for that. And so Section 230 says, look, as long as you're engaged as long as you're doing it in good faith and you're taking down content that's objectively objectionable, it's lewd, indecent, obscene, you can moderate it, take it down if you need to, and you won't be treated as like as a publisher for engaging in that kind of like publisher activity. And it made sense, there's nothing really necessarily wrong with that. The issue is, right now that you have these platforms that no one foresaw, where you have now social media networks that weren't in view when that law was created that host the vast majority of public discourse. And they have gone far beyond moderating objectively objectionable content, and they've started moderating based on politically motivated viewpoint discrimination, where they're taking down opinions they don't like. They're calling things misinformation that are actually true. They're calling things hateful conduct that are actually true. So they're engaging in all kinds of politically motivated viewpoint discrimination. Section 230 wasn't designed to allow them to do that. And so really, 230 could be reformed as simply as adding to it qualifying conditions. You could reform it so that there are qualifying conditions attached to 230 where you say you get immunity from liability for engaging in moderation so long as you never engage in politically motivated viewpoint discrimination. Don't take down people's opinions that you don't like. Don't try to be the arbiter of truth. And as long as you abide by the qualifying conditions, then there's no issue. I think it could be reformed that simply, honestly. But I certainly don't mind having laws in place that protect the right of people to speak on these. What the platforms have argued up to this point is that they have a free speech right, a First Amendment right to censor you. They have a First Amendment right to not be the carrier of your speech, not to host your messages. But what they've done in their terms of service and what they offer themselves as is a public utility. They basically say, we are platforms. This is Twitter's exact words. We are a platform for free expression without barriers. Free speech is a human right. That's in their terms of service. So if their mission statement is to be a platform for free expression without barriers, but they're engaging in politically motivated viewpoint discrimination, then at the minimum, they're committing fraud by not actually making good on that. But I think you could simply have laws in place that prevent them from doing that, and it wouldn't actually. They do not have. The Fifth Circuit Court just ruled recently that they do not have a First Amendment right to censor you. There is no hidden right in the Constitution to muzzle Americans and call it speech. That's not their speech. First of all, they're conduits for the speech of others. They're not speaking when you're speaking. You're speaking. They're just hosting your speech. So they don't have a First Amendment right to shut you up and say they don't want to carry that message. Their whole purpose is to carry those messages. So Justice Thomas has some very interesting commentary on this. He's weighed in and said that he thinks common carrier doctrine should apply. And common carrier doctrine is the legal doctrine that applies to like telecommunications companies, for example. They can't discriminate. Places of public accommodation can't discriminate against you. They can't. You voted for Trump. Well, they still have to serve you anyway. They can't just kick you off. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't infringe on it doesn't compel them to say anything, and it doesn't prevent them from saying anything. These companies still have their own speech rights, but they have to let you exist and have your own viewpoints. So I think there's plenty of precedent for legal changes that could be made. As far as what the law does now, there's a distinction between how it is and how it should be. How it should be is something like that common carrier doctrine should apply so that we are able to speak freely in the public square without these companies running roughshod over our rights. Sorry if that was a long-winded answer to your question, but...
All right, I wanted to, first of all, the church has been behind. We're behind big time. This should have been happening a long time ago. That's why this little percentage of people with the wrong mindset are dominating all these spheres of influence, especially in politics. What happened with you being a pastor's child, and what transition, and was your father helping you, encouraging you in your decision to get out of that realm and to get into politics?
Did you ever encourage me to go into politics? Am I in politics? Is that what I'm doing? No, you've actually had a lot of commentary on politics. You've called politics, what have you referred to politics as?
It's okay, you can insult me.
No. You've had some harsh words for how politicians look at things. I'm trying to think of exactly how you phrased it, but there's a lot of self-interest in politics, and it's not exactly always about advancing the kingdom, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So I was never encouraged to go off into a life of politics. I wouldn't characterize it that way. I was given a lot of free rein in my childhood to kind of figure out figure out on my own where I wanted to go. I was never really pushed in any specific direction. I was pushed onto the tennis court quite a bit and played a lot of tennis growing up, but I enjoyed that, so that was fun. But yeah, I mean, I do think what's been very beneficial for me is having a solid worldview under me that I can bring to these conversations that deal with policy and political issues and legal issues. Coming from a biblical Christian worldview, I have a grounding in what's objectively true and good and right, and have something to reference for that, so that I'm not just on the shifting sands of the time and changing what I think is important or good or true on a whim. Because that's what you have happening. The goalposts are always moving, the Overton window is always shifting, and values are always changing. And people who were considered good, righteous people yesterday, now their views are outmoded and they're being canceled tomorrow, and all that insanity. So I'm thankful for that foundation and the role that my parents played in giving me that and leading me to that. And I also think it's helpful to have a gracious attitude too. I think a Christian worldview brings the understanding of the importance of grace and forgiveness and looking at people as people. They're made in the image of God. This isn't about defeating, like shutting people down and destroying other people. It's about seeing the value in all life and the benefit that they can have from learning the truth. So I have no idea if that answered your question, but I thought it was interesting and insightful.
No, I think that's good. And just to touch on that, I think years ago, the moral and religious arguments within politics, it was like they didn't have to be as involved because so many people in culture had that worldview. And now that we move farther and farther away from it, politics is encroaching on the church. The church was never really encroaching in politics because it wasn't necessary. But now, because the political issues and the devaluation of human life has become at the forefront of our cultural battle, you don't have a choice anymore. You have to bring your biblical worldview into the fight. So you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True.
Last question.
So I noticed you spoke at Ron DeSantis' No Rights event, and my question for you is simple. Who do you support for president in 2020?
Trump or DeSantis? Uh-oh.
There's a camera back there, isn't there? Is this thing on? I can't answer that question right now.
He'll come back, answer it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one. I will. This will be my escape hatch that I'll go through for this. We are a satire publication. We make jokes. We don't endorse political candidates. So, the Bee has never endorsed a candidate for presidency. So, I don't know that we will, in an outspoken way. But it's a good question. It's a fair question. There's nothing wrong with asking it. Yeah.
We'll ask all our guests that question. Roger was very clear about his answer. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Seth Dillon. So, real quick, if you want to get a photo with Seth, I want you to come line up right over here, and we're going to do photos really quick, and then you're all welcome to go. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. This was amazing.
Pastor for 30 years, and I avoided.
It's always time.